Let's talk to Michael Graham, who is a US political commentator. He's also the managing editor of Inside Sources. Michael, this is a very important moment for Keir Starmer. It's probably the biggest meeting of his life, actually. Will it be really register that much for Donald Trump? He's got roughly what he wants in terms of Ukraine, and certainly an increase in defence spending that the UK has agreed to.
Yeah, so everything is a win for Donald Trump, even when it's not a win. That's how he spins everything. And plus, there's so much going on. I mean, when you're in the middle of all the fights he's in, nothing personal, but the UK, when you're trying to deal with Russia, China, the invasion of Ukraine, the space for, thinking about the UK for the average voter is kind of, smallish. I will say, though, I think there's real opportunity for the PM because the talk of the UK being not the EU in its trade relationships with the US, not the EU in, say, a military deal. I think that's a real, Trump loves to wheel and deal. And so if it's the EU and you got 23 people or whatever, I forget the number, I apologize, but Liechtenstein, are you in the back of the room? But if you've got
I think there are 27 members of the EU off the top of my head.
You've got one person, you've got one nation, you've got, deal. I think there's something there. For example, Trump's going to do whatever ends up doing with tariffs. We don't know how much of it he means. The UK's portion of our imports of steel is very small. I think we imported 54.6 million tons and you guys were the 0.6. But at the same time, it's a deal for you. And that's the kind of space where Keir Starmer could say, hey, look, blah, blah, blah. You want us to say how great you are. You want a little help on this. It's a small, for you, how about a deal that lets Keir Starmer walk away with if he's ready to deal. If, however, he wants to do what most people on the European left want to do, which is judge and moralize. Trump's just got no time for him. And look, I say this as I'm not a Trump fan. I'm an old school Reagan internationalist. I think the Republican Party that I'm a part of exists for two reasons: cut taxes and kill commies. And so anytime we can give guns to the Ukrainians to shoot Russians, that's me. But I also have to admit that Trump's argument that, wait a minute, Russia it sent the little green men, 10 years ago? You had Crimea 10 years ago. And in the meantime, Germany's military readiness has gone down. The UK's readiness has gone down. I mean, this isn't a theoretical, you know what I mean? It's not like you can't say, oh my gosh, I had no idea Russia was going to be moving towards Europe. The argument that it's not if Europe doesn't care enough to stop Russia, why should America? And
that's a fair point that I'm sure many Americans will make, especially in the context of this minerals deal. And I wonder, one question I've sort of been posing over the last hour or so of this programme is in regard to this idea of security guarantees. And Keir Starmer says that he wants security guarantees. He wants a kind of backstop, a backup force from America that would support the British and French troops and others, the 30,000 strong proposed troops that would go to Ukraine. I just wonder what security guarantees actually look like, because if there's a $500 billion deal, well, surely that in itself actually has some form of security guarantee that actually says, hold on a second, there are essentially guarantees anyway, because the US wants to guarantee that money, which Donald Trump says is payback for all that the United States has done for Ukraine.
So this goes back to the founding of the United States, where there was the conversation about ideology versus interests. And the founders believed that if people didn't have an interest, it didn't matter how you could write flowery words about democracy and blah, 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 didn't matter. After World War II, we went through this kind of ideology phase where America wanted to be the fortress of democracy, the arsenal of democracy. We were pushing these ideas that, peaked with Iraq, I think you could say. And now we're back in the era of interest. And it's a very pragmatic argument to make. Look, if the U.S. has, the elements we need to make our cell phones and to make our solar panels and to make our high-end widgets coming out of Ukraine, and Russia starts to impinge that supply, it doesn't matter if you are flag waver, commie, left or right. It's holy crap, we're going to lose money here. Holy crap, our factories are going to be hurt. And so in the world that Trump sees it, which, by the way, has been the world most of the time, it's if there's no if there's nothing in it for us, why would we put American soldiers at risk? Why would we put American dollars in the game? I'm curious about what the backstop looks like, because once again, if the message is America should protect Ukraine and maybe Europe can help, that you've lost that fight. In fact, I've been surprised by the number of Democrats who are kind of quietly admitting that fight's over. But if the argument is, you know what? Russia stinks. Look at Ukraine, underarmed, small country. They held them off. Ukraine, Russia's a paper tiger. We definitely have the military skills and wealth to stop Russia. We don't need America to do this. We can do it. But hey, America, we want you to. And then that's where I get confused. Like, do you want us to have a stockpile of weapons that we're prepared to front forward to you if war should break out? Is there money? Do we have money that we commit that if this happens, we'll send money? I know it's that with this president, it's never going to be troops. It's not going to be fighter pilots. It might be the planes, but not the pilots. He's never going to commit to putting an American life at risk to protect Europe. That's your job, is his argument.
Let me ask you a bit about the Chagos Islands, because this is a big controversy, especially for a lot of our viewers and listeners, in terms of the United Kingdom the proposal is to give away territory, British overseas territory, to the Mauritians, who are basically in bed with the Chinese. We know Diego Garcia, one of the islands, is incredibly important because there's an American military base on there. There are big security implications for all of that. How big an issue is this in the United States, and how much do you think ordinary people in the United States care about it, and how much do you think President Trump cares about it?
If we stopped 100 people on the streets of Washington, D.C., and more than 2 of them knew what Chagos Islands meant, I'd be stunned. I mean, and it's partially us. We are not foreign policy people. I make fun of that a lot here on Talk, but it's just true. And then the other part is
they did say that Bill Clinton's foreign policy experience was at the International House of Pancakes.
Exactly. And so then there's also the other thing, which is Donald Trump has set American politics on fire by running out of the gate, doing 500 things a day. So even, we're never going to penetrate. But I will say this, the attitude of the average kind of son of America, if you explain the situation to them, they would think Panama Canal. Why did we give away the Panama Canal? Jimmy Carter, a good liberal, said, well, it's just the right thing to do. Now looking back, does anyone think that it's better that the Panama Canal, and once again, not the country, whatever, I'm sure maybe give them more wealth, maybe whatever, you can do things, but the actual thing, America should control that because it's too important. Does Britain really still think giving up Hong Kong made sense? Hasn't this turned out to be a total fiasco?
Yes, it has.
It certainly has not helped the cause of freedom, democracy, and capitalism. And so then the third part is anything you say that ends with which will help China, you're going to get about an 80-20 against vote in the United States. Americans have very much internalized hating China. China is the new Russia, and it goes back pre-Trump. It goes back to the perception. For example, my father was a TV repairman. There was a day when you could do that for a living. He had a business for 30 years. In 10 years, his business disappeared because of cheap imports from China, no tariffs, no protection, no nothing. His whole business just went out. Boom. He had the biggest business in the entire state of South Carolina where I grew up, and it just disappeared. And there's people like that across the country who they worked in factories and manufacturing and in sales, and what they did ended when China poured onto the international market.
And they may well reasonably say, well, this is a president who is putting, as he put it, America first, and these tariffs, we don't actually care about these other countries. They can look after themselves. It should be American homes, businesses, businessmen and women, and manufacturing that comes first. And that is a perfectly reasonable thing to do. There are quite a few people who are viewers and listeners to this programme that admire Donald Trump's patriotism and would argue that that isn't replicated from Keir Starmer. And that's a big aspect of this. That appears to our viewers and listeners anyway to be a big difference between the two men.
But there's also a big difference between the two national circumstances. Why was Britain the king of the world for 150 years, this tiny little country? Partially because of technology, partially because of geography, where you were located. You could influence Europe. You had the seagoing nation. You went across to Asia and America and everything. And now we're in this situation where China and America are two massive land masses and peoples. When it comes to tariffs, we don't need the trade the way that by definition the UK should need trade. You know what I'm saying? It should be a hub of where stuff comes and where money flows and whatever. And so I just think you're in a tougher position if the world starts retrenching. And because it seems to me, and it's always seemed to me, that from Brexit, the opportunity has been to be the smart Europe. Europe does dumb EU things that come out of, the Belgian building knuckleheads run. And you guys do. We're never going to be America, like we're not that, because that's not our culture, but we're going to be more, capitalism, more small government, more liberal, more open. And to me, the thing that outrages me about the issue of immigration is there are all these great ideas that have to do with openness and trade where we can all get wealthier and be safer and happier. And the extremists on immigration who wanted to open the borders everywhere, who said any regulations are bad, they've now closed a bunch of doors in addition to the immigration door. And that's the real tragedy. London could be the powerhouse economic hub between East and West. And part of the thing that's getting in the way is the changes that have come because no one trusts the people in charge to have their hand on the door.
Although Keir Starmer, who is, we hope, arriving at the White House in just a few minutes' time, he's about a minute and a half late, but we will tell you.
He's got to go through the metal detector. They got to pat him down. There's all that.
Well, we had actually Harry Cole, who's the political editor of The Sun, who was about 45 minutes late for what we had to want to discuss with him because all those Secret Service agents were going through his bags. But yes.
Hey, we've seen those Mission Impossible movies.
It's
not really your guy. It's Tom Cruise in a mask.
That's right.
Who we're gonna get.
I'm sure it's Tom Cruise. I think they're perhaps a little bit taller.
Hey, you can laugh, but most Americans get their foreign policy information from Mission Impossible movies. So
well, listen, they're a very useful cultural resource. I think those Secret Service people are probably a little bit taller than Tom Cruise, but that doesn't take much. It must be said. I mean, Keir Starmer is someone who has described himself as a bridge between or wants to be a bridge, certainly in the last couple of weeks, between Ukraine and America. Is he seen that way? Do you think that's a realistic way to describe himself? Because we have lots of different NATO countries, lots of Western European countries saying lots of different things in regard to what their position, what their input should be, especially when it comes to Ukraine. And this comes into an idea of the special relationship as well. I'm not sure, having lived and worked in Washington, whether that's the way that Washingtonians, the administration, or Donald Trump himself will necessarily see it. I just wonder what you think, Michael.
I think that Donald Trump steps over everybody. Trump has put himself in it. I was listening to some very smart analysts this morning who said that they don't think there'll be a final deal for Ukraine, Russia, and the war until Trump and Putin are in the room together. Trump wants to sit there and sign that document. And so whether it's Keir Starmer saying, here's what we think the UK can do as far as troops, whether it's Macron saying France is prepared to go this far but no farther, I think for the American people, Trump seems to be in the center of it. And by the way, I don't think it's just the American people. I think Trump really has put himself in the center of this in a way that presidents in the past probably would not have. So Americans are watching Trump. They'll follow Trump's lead, either agree or disagree, but that's how we're processing it. And then if Trump says, okay, we're going to go forward and I'm going to make commitments to Europe, I want to know how he makes them. Does he make them to NATO? He loves shaking NATO's cage. Does he really want to help NATO? Or does he make them to Britain is committed to doing X, therefore we're going to, whatever, sell arms or give support to Britain. France has agreed to do Y, and therefore we're going to do this. I'll be curious to see how Trump, the deal maker, if he doesn't find ways to make maybe not individual deals, but side deals, I guess I would say.
Yes. Michael, thank you. That's Michael Graham there, who is a US political commentator. He's also the managing editor of Inside Sources.